Hi and welcome to a Kirby Maths video all about functions. Now we have already come across functions before in terms of function machines, and if you haven't done that then there is a video on function machines. So this is a function machine where we put a number in, that's called the input. We do something to that number, might be timesing by 3, then adding 1, and then we get a number coming out. That's called the output. So that's a function machine. We have got equations, and again, if you haven't done equations, there is a video about solving equations, and an equation looks like this. It's got an equal sign in it, and it doesn't always have to have x's and y's, but usually it has x's and y's. And this function machine, timesing by 3 and adding 1, is a different way of writing this equation, 3 times something plus 1. And finally we've also got a table of values, which again there is another video on, where we put different values of x into this equation, 1, 2 and 3, and we would get a value of y out, where we would then be able to get a table of coordinates. I actually called it coordinates, didn't I, on the video, so table of coordinates. Okay, so all of those things tied together we can use to do something a little bit more complicated, which is called evaluating functions. And functions are written like this. So this is a function, and we're going to put a number through the function. And when we're talking about this, we would say f of x. And that's just an abbreviated way of saying I'm going to put x through this function. And what it means is we're going to do the equation bit to the value x. Probably easiest if we do an example of this. So if I have a function, and I'm going to use one that is the same as this, f of x is equal to 3x plus 1, and I am asked to evaluate, and that just means work out f of 3, and that means I'm going to put the value 3 into this function. To start off with, you need to do plenty of workings out for this, and then as you get a bit more proficient with it, you'll be able to do it in a single step. But to start off with, we know that this means 3 times the value of x, then add 1. So we would write 3 times 3, probably put it in a bracket, and then add 1 onto that, which is 9 plus 1, which is 10. So f of 3, when I've put the function 3 through that function, I get the value 10. I can put any number I like through the function, I just have to make sure it's in this bracket. So I could do f of 5, which would be 3 times 5, because I'm using this function here, 3 times 5, then add 1, so that's 15 plus 1, which equals 16. So f of 5 is equal to 16. Of course, I can do it with negative numbers as well. If I was asked to evaluate f of minus 2, again, with negative numbers, you always have to just take a little bit of extra care. So I would write this out in full. So 3 times minus 2, and then add 1. 3 times minus 2 is minus 6, add 1, so that would be minus 5. So f of minus 2 is equal to minus 5. You don't always have to have the letter f to denote a function. You could have the letter g and g of x, and we could say that that's equal to something else. So g of x is equal to x squared, and this is telling us excuse me, that the function g, whatever is in that little bracket there, to get the answer you just need to square it. Excuse me. So if I want to evaluate g of 7, I'm using this function, so it would be 7 squared, which would be 49. If I wanted to do g of 2, it would be 2 squared, which would be equal to 4. And again, with a negative number, you just have to be careful with the signs and think just a little bit longer about what you're going to do when you square a negative number. So g of minus 3 is minus 3 squared, which is minus 3 times minus 3. And remember, a minus times a minus is a plus, so that becomes positive 9. Okay, so let me just quickly go back over this with a couple of points. F of x is the function, and we always say f of x or g of x. The letter here, f of x, tells us that this function is 3x plus 1. That's the function we're going to use. And then we use a different letter if we're going to have a different function. Evaluating just means work out. And what you're being asked to do here is, what is the value of this when I say that x is 3? So 3 times 3 is 9, add 1 is 10. Just be careful with the negative numbers, and also be careful if during part of a question it changes what the function is. So here I've got f being used, and that's this function here. And then the second part of the question I used a different function, a different letter. So we've got different rules. Instead of doing 3 times the number add 1, I was squaring it. And once again, with negative numbers, just be a little bit careful of what you're doing with the signs. Thanks for watching.